Sounds good.
Greetings. We here at PLD Projects want to make it known that we wholeheartedly support the strikes by both SAG-AFTRA and the WGA against the greedy corporate studio executives. It is a fight for basic human decency. Our reviews, discussions, and critiques are in no way supporting the studios, merely dissecting the art and how these wonderful actors and writers continue to influence us on a daily basis. We thank you. PLD PJ Campbell. Two mediocre white dudes on film. Because frankly, we know you don't have enough of that in your life. So we're here to give you more. And without further ado, here are two mediocre white dudes on film.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back. I beat you. I
You
beat
did
you,
beat me.
you fuck.
Motherfucker. You actually kind of gave up the past couple of weeks. You didn't let me go with it, though. This time you're jumping forward. You're going forward.
I needed to make sure that I made it known again who was actually in control of this podcast.
Announcing your presence, as it were.
You would know. Obviously this is very important to me.
I mean, you did take control of my life last night. I mentioned this in my tweet today. I was laying there. I was like, okay, you know what? I'm going to go to bed early tonight. I had nothing to do. I had some editing I wanted to do. But I was like, you know what? I'm just going to take it easy. I'm going to go to bed, get a good night's sleep, and then I'll do some editing tomorrow morning. And then I get this text from PJ Campbell right as I'm about to lay down. Top 5 Doctor Who episodes, New Who, go.
Yeah.
And I couldn't ignore it. I was called, the clarion called for battle at that point. I was like, okay, let's do it.
Exactly. I knew what I was doing. I knew exactly what I was doing when I did it.
And I spit it out there, and I had him spit his out there. And then, like, all of a sudden, next thing we know, we're both going, yeah, but we missed all these other ones that we want to throw out there. So it just like became a text of like episode titles. Oh, yeah, but this one. Oh, yeah, but this one. Oh, yeah, but this one. And we're like, yeah, that's good. Oh, that's a good one. But also this one. So that led me down a rabbit hole where all of a sudden I had my phone on, and Kim's sleeping next to me, so I couldn't even put on the TV. But I'm on my phone, and I'm just pitching up the greatest hits of Doctor Who. And the next thing I know, it's like 4:30 in the morning. And I'm like, well, there goes my early night. God, curse you, PJ, curse you. At the same time, I was loving it. I'm sobbing in bed next, like Kim's like next to me, like has no idea what's going on. And I'm like, oh.
So well, I don't know. I mean, there's this whole thing about every time that I get incredibly stoned that you anticipate if I'm like really incredibly stoned and I start texting you, it's because I'm watching Doctor Who. And
yes.
I was going down like my own rabbit hole of like, what are the best stories? What are some of the storylines that got dropped? What are some of the, and I started going down that rabbit hole, which led me to, well, now I need to know what your top 5 New Who episodes are. And then I tried to tweet out, like, if you had a favorite TV show and you were trying to get someone into it, who would, like, you pick 5 episodes, go. And one person responded to it. No one else did. And thank you, Matt Kearns, number 1. But it was just like, I was just in this headspace of I only wanted to talk about your favorite things about a TV show and like how you would get people on board for it, basically.
Well, damn you for just wanting to be positive about TV and everything else and there's positive in the space. I applaud you for that. I didn't answer your tweet, so I was answering you in text. So there's at least 2 people there. So, okay, fair enough.
Well, the funny thing is you say that, and then like less than 10 minutes ago in the group chat for this podcast that we have and for the channel, I kind of got into it with people being like, man, thank God for Ahsoka moving to like 6 p.m., 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And I'm like, yeah, good thing that the internet didn't, make the episodes disappear after 3 a.m. on the East Coast. And people are like, yeah, but we had to stay up all night. And I'm like, yeah, but you can also stay offline and not be spoiled, even though I also think people shouldn't be spoiling things online. And now there's other people across the world who are now screwed over by our like time thing. And that's my whole thing with the situation is people not understanding like we are not the center of the world in the universe. And that's why I'm glad the streaming age is coming to an end now. And we're starting to see it like falling apart because it's breaking people's minds where they're like, we deserve a thing so we don't get spoiled. And it's like, or we could just not get online, not worry about it, and or not spoil things for people. Because here's the thing, right? If you and I go to a movie at 7 p.m., we are there's no world where we are not allowed to talk about that later on the internet, right?
Right,
And you
right,
can't tell people not to go to the movies. We just leave those at the same time. Now,
right.
granted, you can't really do that with streaming, though it would be an interesting concept of every hour, depending on your like spot,
Your
it would
time zone, right?
reopen. But
Be open.
yeah,
That'd be an
right.
interesting
There's a
experiment.
way
That'd
to.
be a very interesting experiment to have. Like you
It
can
really
turn off the
would.
internet, like the internet gets turned off for you until a certain period of time passes by, then you can talk about it. Um, I mean, there's definitely a responsibility on both ends. Obviously, I
There
would
is. There
I'd
absolutely
love to
is.
be able to go onto the internet, and if I hadn't seen something, not get spoiled by it. But do understand the risk I take. It doesn't stop me from being mad when I do get spoiled, but I will bear some of the responsibility of being, yeah, that kind of sucks that I was online, so it's partially my fault. But at the same time, people just don't be dicks. Don't be dicks. Um,
That's kind
keep
of
it
all
to
I. Yeah, like I
like
just honestly
find
just
your
don't be an
places.
asshole.
You can find your places to
Yeah.
talk about it. Like, I mean, like you can text your friends. Oh, you've seen it? Okay, we're going all in. We can do a video about it and be like, hey, this is a spoiler video. So you're free to come talk spoilers in this video, in this chat kind of thing, or whatever, that kind of thing. That can be done. That can be done. It's like, it just avoid the like putting it out there on social media into that blank space when there's no warning. That's the thing. These are just a warning somewhere, then you're good. Of
I agree,
course.
and that just kind of comes down to the don't be an asshole about it, right?
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. And
And
of course,
people
you're
don't
talking.
necessarily know how to do that. It's the
It's
internet.
true. That's
The
that is
the
the
internet
damn
has no
truth.
chill. I understand this, and
Oh,
you know, to Pat
really? No
in the
chill.
chat, who I know when he listens to this, he's gonna go, "This guy's talking about me." To Pat, I am. We're talking about all of this together as a collective because we're not assholes about it. I understand where you're coming from, having to be up early in the morning and not wanting to be spoiled. I do get that, but there's a responsibility on our own also not to put ourselves in a position where that can happen.
But I will say at the same time, I'm happy for those people who are happy about it.
I am too. I'm also
Absolutely.
feel bad for the people who are now upset about it.
Yeah,
Because
there's
those
a
people
different people.
also exist. That's
I
my
know
point.
people
Like
okay,
everyone wants
yeah.
to celebrate it, and they're like, "Don't rain on the parade," and it's like, yeah, but now there are people in other parts of the world that
Parades
now have to be up until 3 a.m.
have the rain parade on or whatever, but that's fine. I mean, it is what it is at this point. All I know is I don't care. I'm putting it all aside right now. I'm just fucking excited for Ahsoka. I can't wait. We talk about that on PLD Projects tomorrow with me and Maddie Gunner. But I've been waiting a long time for this particular show. And I'm hearing good things. For everything I'm hearing, I'm going to love it. I mean, I can't say that for sure until I see it myself, but from the things I have heard, spoiler free type stuff, but it seems like if you are a fan of Rebels, then you will like the show. And Rebels is one of my favorite pieces of Star Wars media.
Well,
So,
Rebels is the
so
best thing in the current like new canon, just bar none for me.
probably, I mean, I would argue I like those last 4 episodes of Clone Wars really got me. Really, that might be my favorite specific storyline, the Siege of Mandalore thing, from the Clone Wars
Oh yeah,
finale they
for
brought
sure. Don't
season
get me
7.
wrong.
That might be it.
It's
That might
great.
be it for me. And I love the Bad Batch more than most people do, but I do think Rebels might have the overall cake as well. Animated is
Rebels
definitely
is my
one.
favorite overall.
I think animated has definitely been the winner here. Not that I've enjoyed all the Star Wars projects one end to another, Mandalorian, but I even like
I
Boba
mean,
Fett. But
you
like
and I liking things is just not that shocking.
that's true. That's
So
true.
I'm just gonna throw that out there right now. Like the fact that you and I are also like, actually, most of the Lucasfilm era under Disney is pretty good, and people are like, "Wow, you guys are fucking idiots," and it's like, well, probably, but also Star Wars is good actually. Space wizards, laser swords, pew pew pew. Like, do they have
We
their
are
problems?
idiots.
Absolutely. We are two mediocre white idiots in a box.
Occasionally we are, and that's definitely going to come back in November, if nothing else.
My God, the 60th so far this year has been so good on the
Oof.
big finish front, man. Oh
I
my god.
still have listened to the newest one. I will get to that soon, but yeah, I'm excited about where it's going.
I implore anyone who even, like, occasionally dabbles in Doctor who listens to this show, to find the once and future episodes that Big Finish has been doing for the 60th, where the Doctor is degenerating through phases and doesn't know why during the Time War. It is
Yeah,
fucking awesome.
it's been a lot of fun so far. Definitely a lot of fun so far, and I can't wait to see what's coming up next with it as well. A lot of time to go, a lot of episodes to go, and of course we got the 3 specials coming out in November, which we definitely going to have to cover somehow. Be doing
Some
extra
way, yeah.
extra podcasting those weeks or whatever. Some specials
I
there, but
I'm just loving the show again, to be
yeah,
honest, and feeling so excited about it. I'm
yeah. The
excited for a new era.
13th Doctor, like, even though we love Jodie, both of us have said that Jodie's a great doctor, was a great doctor. The writing was not up to snuff as far as we're concerned. Although, even in our conversation last night, we definitely pitched a few 13th Doctor era episodes that we felt were jewels of the era overall.
Yeah,
But
because they
I
do
think we
exist.
Oh, they absolutely do exist. I think the problem we have, both of us have, is that it became less exciting for us. Like the whole era just seemed like we weren't excited about coming out. It was more of a slog. And now, with the big momentum shift, the big return of Russell T Davies, and a return of a big direction and success, and return of David Tennant also doesn't hurt. Obviously,
I
bringing
mean,
back some
that
cast
really
members.
doesn't, yeah, I was gonna say that doesn't make the situation worse, let's be honest. There are
It
some
just
fans who are not that thrilled about it, but I am not one of the people who is upset about him coming back for 3 more episodes.
Not at all, absolutely. And it seems like it does feel like a breath of fresh air is being breathed into the franchise. And I am, once again, very excited for the first time since Peter Capaldi left, really. So there is that. There is that. So yeah, we're definitely going to be returning soon.
I I also think that with the return of Russell T Davies and the way he's talked about the show for so long, and you can kinda see it with Big Finish as well, like, they've all gotten really smart about doing the world building of Who and really leaning in on, like, the MCU-ness
Right.
of it, if you will, where you're trying to expand the world, so you're getting audio dramas with, say, Sarah Jane when they did before the Sarah Jane Adventures, but now they're doing, like, Unit, and
Right.
the Diary of River Song ended this morning, like, for the last time, they did 12 episodes or 12 series of it.
Yeah.
So I think it's and she popped up in other things, but, like, it's actually Alex Kingston in that role, playing River again in audio, and I
Right.
think with the shift that Davies has talked about is that he wants to do it so that we have Doctor Who kind of throughout the year more prominently, but it wouldn't just necessarily be the main show, and I think that we're gonna find out that we are getting a unit series. I think we are
Yeah.
going to get a companion sort of series. I think we're going to start seeing anthology type things that allow them to use characters and actors that we wouldn't necessarily get to hang out with again. And
Yeah.
I love that.
I fully agree. I mean, the Doctor, I mean, is probably one of the biggest universes we have as far as fiction go, and it's
Easily.
pretty untapped overall as far as that kind of goes. We always have the main Doctor stories, but we've only had a few. Like the Torchwood was pretty successful, Sarah Jane Adventures
Sarah
were really
Jane Adventures
successful, and we have that
and Class
one-off
lasted a
class.
season.
I did a one-off
Yeah.
class, which unfortunately didn't really spark enough interest to continue. But there just seems to be a lot of possibilities you could throw out there. I mean, there's people who would push for a reunion of Torchwood, which I would completely understand and be behind. But like, it's just exciting that we can get more of these things. Like I'm setting up so many different things we could do, and it feels also like we could see more returns of people. It feels like in this day and age where like the whole alternate universe thing with like everybody, the legacy people coming back for things. I feel like that's more commonplace now. Where really Doctor Who kind of sort of started that, honestly. Think
Yeah.
about it, like, bring because they would bring back
Them and
people
Trek.
left, right? Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I'm in track. But like, I feel like you could take it. I can feel it's more commonplace now. We could see older doctors come back for and just write ways. They have to imaginally, right? Use their imagination why they're older, like the curator bit in time of the Doctor, or Day
Oh
of the
my god, the curator stuff has been so good in
Mm,
Big Finish, by the way,
yeah,
because they
yes,
have
it has.
used the curator a couple of times
Yep,
post the 50th. One
absolutely.
twice so far with Tom Baker, twice so far with Colin Baker.
Right.
And the idea of the curator can revisit faces whenever the curator decides. And I love
That's
that because it opens up the possibilities of how many other actors would want to come back.
right. And I'm really kind of curious as how he gets there. But I don't know if that's a story we ever need actually being told. If we do, it's probably a long way in the future. But I'm definitely curious to see how he gets to that point. But yeah, either way, I'm excited about David Tennant. I'm excited about the season after the new season starting. Is it starting? Do we know for sure when that new season is starting? Is it starting
Well,
the end?
it sounds like the Christmas special is for sure. So we have to assume that
Okay.
it's 3 episodes plus the Christmas special. So 4 this year,
Right. And then
not
next season
including, yeah,
would be next year at some point then. That's what
that
I'm
would be my
thinking.
assumption. And I'm going to guess it's going to kick off pretty fast.
Okay. Okay. I hope so. I hope so. Because I mean, like, I could totally see because Doctor Who has always been one of those things that kind of takes its time, and it's fine if the quality is worth it. But it is sometimes not frustrating is the right word, but like you get through those 3 episodes and it's like, oh, I gotta wait a year for the actual rest of the season to
Well,
begin. Now it's like,
that's exactly what Davies wants to get away from.
yeah,
He was tired of watching the show get treated like that. And I
right,
think ultimately also the BBC realizes they can no longer do that because I don't think people remember what a big deal it was when season 5 and 6 started airing over here on the BBC, and, like, that was a momentum shift for the show, but the problem was is they really rode season 5 into season 6, and it was going okay, but then they split the season, and then they
right,
split season 7, and you started to
right.
feel that momentum shift change because we were waiting a year for 7 episodes, a year
Yeah,
and
it
a
was really
half for
slowing
7
down.
episodes. Yeah,
And
and
now
they
with
really lost it.
yeah, well, now with the move to Disney Plus, also like internationally speaking, I feel like they're gonna try to get hit for a more consistent basis. I kind of feel like,
Oh,
and that's a good
absolutely.
thing. So
I think Disney being involved ultimately is actually a better deal for people overall than I think we anticipated.
I do
Um,
too. I do too. Because they can put a little more money into it. They can put a little more like resources into it and more
well, and
promotion to a
just
degree. You know, I just right. Yeah, exactly.
leveraging the way that they can actually get to people, right? Like, I remember living in Los Angeles when 11 and was beginning his run and seeing billboards for Doctor Who, and, like, the hype was very real of,
Yeah.
like, the show because they really treated it like a fresh start because it
Yeah.
was. New
Mm,
era, new doctor, new showrunner, new everything,
yeah.
but they made it an
Absolutely.
event, and it kinda went away after that, and now
Yep.
it's about trying to get that back and
And that
trying
was
to,
strange
like,
for
leverage
me
that.
because I remember, like, I probably said this on the channel before, but I'll say it again quickly. Like, I was into the Doctor when I was really young. 'Cause my cousin was a big Doctor Who fan, still is, but he was like, and he's older than I am. He's a very old school Doctor Who fan from classic days, and he loved Tom Baker and Peter Davison, and he was all throughout. Now, I was young as a kid, and I watched it. I loved Tom Baker as my Doctor, but I didn't like watch it consistently because it wasn't a thing for me. It was on. If it was on, I was watching it, but I never like sat down and watched it really. But then like
Right.
I forgot about it for a while. A New Who came out. It didn't really make a blip because it was just BBC. But when it came to America, I remember like some groups I was kind of started to push. I was like, Doctor Who. I haven't watched that in a long time. And I watched an episode or two. And I started getting into it a little bit, but then it kind of again slowed down at the point where at some point I was like, you know what, forget about it. I'm not going to worry about it. But I decided at that point to go back to streaming and start binge watching like from New Who on to kind of catch up and get my own momentum going. When was able to binge it myself and keep that momentum going, it worked wonders. When you have to wait so long, it doesn't work because you kind of like you fall out of it. That's what happens.
Yeah, it does, and that's kind of ultimately also, I think, weirdly a problem now in the streaming age, and I know I've kind of been actually, like, poking at the streaming age lately, but we're seeing it fall apart in a lot of
Hmm.
ways because all these studios are realizing that streaming is actually not profitable because if you're not selling the shows or the movies or whatever, or you're not putting them on television with ad revenue, you're not making money. You're just
Right.
wasting money. But the other thing that we're now seeing, and you're starting to see it with Disney Plus, and they got ahead of this more than most. And I blame Netflix for most of this. The reason a lot of us are also impatient nowadays is because binge watching became such a thing.
Yeah.
And that really rose with Netflix. Like, you could binge watch stuff on DVD for, like, Lost. I remember Lost was, like, the last great binge show when people
Yeah.
really wanted to get caught up
Yep.
to, like, get to the last season. But
Mhm.
Netflix was the thing that this shifted for, because they were dropping everything at once, at one time, and you would watch 1 through 10 to 13 episodes most of the time.
Yep.
But the problem in doing that is now you have to wait another year for another 13 episodes. You didn't space it out. You're not creating talk around it, and then the momentum changes. And I actually saw people talking about this the other day. Like, the Bear season 2, I did not realize dropped all at once.
Right.
And had they done it weekly, it would have ended 2 days ago or whatever it was. And the conversation around The Bear season 1 seemed huge, but I barely saw people talking about season 2 comparatively, because
Right.
you're all watching it in different orders instead of it being,
The same time. Right.
conversationally a week-long thing.
Yeah. I've
All
always
this
thought
to
that.
say, when you're doing something like with Doctor Who and you're trying to get into a show and you're watching it and you're enjoying it, and then you lose a year and a half if you are finally caught up, it's a bummer, and you start to, like, lose interest.
And the worst part is if you're like, and what happened, I think, with us also with the 13th Doctor, is if you're doing that and you're writing a suspect, then it's like, it's double whammy. I mean, if your writing is great, you might be able to keep up the interest. But if you do the double whammy of it being like not as good of a season, and then like you're going to totally not just lose, you're going to not just lose momentum, you're going to die. You're just going to die momentum wise. That's it. I really
Yeah.
think binging has been like one of the worst things that's happened. I remember when it first came out, I got Netflix, and Stranger Things was the first one I binged. I remember that when that came out, and I loved the concept at that time. I was like, holy shit, I can just watch the whole season right now. That's awesome. And I spent like that next 2 days or whatever just watching the first season. Loved it. Then realized later on, it's like, wow. And more times I did that, it's like, okay, so the conversation was basically over in a day, and then you had to wait
Yeah.
a year, or maybe a couple days. You might, if you were lucky, you got like a week or two of conversation,
Yeah.
and then you waited a year and a half before, and then it's like you have to start all over and rebuild the momentum. This way, you get like 8, 10 episodes. At least you get 10 weeks of conversation, and then that kind of slow, because it's a slow build, but it's also the slow decrease as people like kind of catch up and everything else. Yeah, it's just it's a tough thing. I mean,
No,
the
it's a
other
totally
argument, the other argument also is that, I mean, like, for better or for worse, with streaming, you're cutting down on like instead of getting 20 episodes, 21 episodes, now you're getting the 8 to 10 episodes. And there's arguments for and against that. Again, the 20 episodes, you get 20 weeks to talk about it, and you can kind of slow burn the story. But yes, there's that dreaded filler talk. You have some filler episodes, but I always found the filler episodes were not as filler as people thought they were a lot of times. Sometimes it just was great character development. Sometimes like it may not be important to the major storyline, but it's nice to spend some time with those characters, and it spreads out the momentum a little bit further too. So there's something to be said about that as well. I mean, again, the counter argument
Yeah.
being 8 to 10 episodes, absolutely, you get to cut the chaff and to have that straight direct story. That's cool too. But momentum wise, does it work when you have to spread it out like you do? I don't know.
No, it doesn't, and a perfect example of that is Stranger Things. I
Right?
love Stranger Things, but Stranger Things 4, I told you, I felt like I needed to binge the first half of that season in a day.
Yeah.
And the bummer is also because of how much we are letting television evolve, some of those episodes are an hour, hour and a half. They're not just 40, 45, an
Right.
hour long.
Right. There's a
Now, not
big
only are you running
difference.
into that, yeah,
I want to tell you, there's a big. I want to interject real quick because there's a big. Because it relates to something I'm doing. Like, there's a huge difference between a 45-minute episode and a 90-minute episode. Like, I'm
yes,
watching the Young Indiana Jones Chronicles right now, and I told you about
yes, you
this.
are.
And I've had like, I want to say that I love what I'm watching, but I'm not gonna lie. I feel like I would like it better if it was in the 45-minute episode range. I feel like the 90-minute movies they made it into kind of sometimes make it a little bit of a slog. Like I remember watching the show,
Yeah,
especially because those are two episodes like legitimately like stitched together. So like there's that point in the middle, you're kind of
yeah,
like,
right.
oh, we're only halfway through. This feels like it's wrapping up, kind of thing. Oh, it is wrapping up, but we're going on to a next adventure. And I know I've actually taken it upon myself recently to kind of go, okay, I'm gonna watch the 45 minutes. I'll stop, do something, and I'll come back later on and watch the second part if I have to, kind of
Right.
thing. It feels less of a slog that way. But yeah, that's just all I'm saying. It's a big difference between 45 minutes and 90 minutes, even though it doesn't seem like there's that big of a difference. It really is.
No, it
But
really is, and because of that, also, then it feels like you're forcing yourself to do a thing, right?
right.
And this is actually
Mhm.
goes into the staying up until midnight or 3 AM thing.
Yeah.
Like, you're forcing yourself to do it, and at that point, are you actually enjoying it?
Yes, that's
Or
the
are you
question.
doing it just because you feel like you have to be able to have a part of the conversation, even though ultimately maybe you're not enjoying it as much? Because I enjoyed Stranger Things season 4 much more on a second watch, broken up over a couple episodes at a time when I was watching
Yeah.
it with my parents versus sitting down by myself binging.
Yeah, I agree. I fully agree. To do that, maybe I have to do that soon. I should do a rewatch of season 4. So I haven't watched it since I did the first watch through. I bet you I would watch it, would like it better this time
I
through. If
mean,
I gave myself a little bit of a
give yourself that space to
yeah,
enjoy it and stuff.
yeah,
You like I 100% acknowledge that it is not for everyone if they don't feel that way, but like I felt it changed the momentum completely
yeah,
of the show,
ab-
or at
absolutely,
least for
absolutely.
me. But I also just thought season 4 spun its wheels a little long, regardless on like the Russia storyline stuff. And it's I think season 3 is my favorite of the show, followed by season 1, and then it's probably season 4 and then season 2. But I ultimately found season 4 on the lower end, if you will.
Interesting, because actually, I felt season 4 was just the best thing since season 1 myself. However, I don't disagree that the whole Russia storyline was way too. They spent way too long on not much movement on there. Like I felt like they were just trying to like find something for him to do while they find something for Hopper to
Yeah.
do while everybody else was doing stuff. Um, and I get it had its up and down moments, but the overall epic feel of it took the cake for me and allowed to kind of like take it past the goal line to make it like my second favorite season. Um, yeah, second
I
favorite
just
season.
didn't like how broken up everyone was at this point because I'm kind of
Agreed.
over that as a thing,
Agreed.
especially because like it feels like they have to find a reason to do it every time, and then you have to get the gang together, and it's like I much prefer when the gang is just together at this point.
You know,
You know,
I had a feeling
it,
that's what's going to happen in season 5. That's what the season 5 is going to be. That's my thought process
oh,
on that.
absolutely.
Um,
It's
and
absolutely going to be that 'cause it's the final season. It has
yeah,
to be.
and I wonder if that's the case. I wonder if it's a way of like making you want that. Like there's a fine line between like
Maybe.
making like not like the season because of it and making you long for it, so that when it does happen, it's like a yes, they're
Oh, for
finally
sure.
together kind of thing.
Absolutely.
So
And again,
it's a
it's
fine
not a
line.
bad season of television. I
Yeah.
just want that noted. I mean, it also had some of easily the best stuff in all of Stranger Things. Like, I think, what is it, episode 4? Because that's the running up the hill episode, the very first time when they're at
Mhm.
the graveyard. That's the best episode of Stranger Things ever. Like,
Mm.
just period. I think that some of the best storytelling in Stranger Things is in season 4.
Yeah.
But I
Yes, that
also
I'll
just
agree.
prefer some of the storytelling in like the simplicity of season 1 when in like rewatching it. And similarly, season 3 feels like the best version of that.
Mm. I mean,
I don't know, and it just works for me.
I totally understand that 'cause I mean, like, this is like to me, you're giving me my John Wick argument to you. My John Wick
Yeah,
argument is I've
probably.
always preferred the first one. I've always preferred the first one over all the other ones because of the simplistic tale, because the simplicity of it is kind of it feels like it's at its trimmest and leanest and fighting its spirit in the first film. Where I enjoy 2, 3, and 4, and I really by 4, I've really gotten over myself as far as like how it's gotten bigger and bigger,
Yeah.
more cartoonish or whatever in a way. And I love it for what it is, but at the same time, I still kind of prefer the simplicity of the lean, mean tale of John Wick 1. To say for the exact same reason you like Stranger Things 1. So I get that argument to a T. So, but
Well, yeah, and again, I mean, it's just good in general also.
yeah, yeah,
And it's funny
absolutely,
because I go down these rabbit holes. Actually, speaking of John Wick, so I was at the bar this weekend, and AMC had a John Wick marathon going on. And you know me, I tend to have counter programming on when I'm bartending. I
right,
usually have sports on two of the televisions, and then usually two of the TVs across the bar have the same movie playing, like on TNT or AMC or whatever.
right.
So the John Wick movies were on,
Mm,
and it was funny. Like I have just rewatching them again and seeing the first one, that moment of like it being so simplistic, and then you get like by the time the third one gets on, I'm sitting there and I'm like, oh my god, girlfriend was sitting next to me, and I was like, oh my god, you got to see this part. He's about to use a horse as a weapon, and just the like, I'm sorry, what? And I was like, he's about to use a horse as a weapon. It's awesome. I just get very excited about these things. She's like, I'm really happy you're happy. And I was like, I appreciate that. And so then my buddy Kyle, he comes to the bar and he and I are very friendly. He listens to the podcast actually, which is a very nice. Hi, Kyle. Yeah. But I like looked at Kyle and I was like, hey, Kyle, John Wick's about to use a horse as a weapon. He goes, fuck yeah. And I was like, see, I'm surrounded by, someone who is genuinely happy that I'm happy about a horse being used as a weapon, but genuinely, it's not her thing, and that's okay. Like I appreciate she puts up with like my obsessive nerdiness on certain things because it's who I am.
Absolutely.
But she also does it in like a very caring way. But then 100%. There's like, I'm also happy that Kyle is there where I could be like, Kyle, he's going to use a horse as a weapon. He's like, isn't it fucking awesome? And I'm like, yes, it is. And Kyle's son was building the 89 Batwing Lego set while they were at the bar. So he's cool. Also raising a small miniature nerd in training.
The best part about that's one of the best parts of having kids. I'm not gonna lie. Like one of my favorite parts of having a kid now. My son's older now, and he's going to be a senior in high school. But he really got into animation and stuff. But he's really got into animated series, and he just made me. Maybe we trade off things. Like I've been showing him all Star Wars. He's been showing me all anime stuff and everything else. But he's been getting into like animated series, and we just watched the Spectacular Spider-Man series, and now we're watching the 1990s Spider-Man series, and he watched it, loved it, loving it. And he's like, no, so all these series like Spider-Man, Batman animated series, which I never really fully watched, and he is like going into, I'm gonna watch that too. I'm like, so you're gonna put that in our queue? Excellent. So like it's like giving me it's like almost forcing me to watch it. Like it's one of those things I'm gonna watch eventually anyway. I wanted to watch eventually, and now he's like making me sit down. I'm like, okay, I'm happy to do that. I'm excited to do that. Batman, X-Men, all those like 90s animated shows we're watching. So yeah, I'm loving that so
far. so real talk. When are you guys gonna watch DuckTales and Scooby-Doo Mystery Incorporated?
I think that might be a little bit off the beaten path at this point. We'll see that. We'll see. We'll have to see.
Are you kidding me? They're two of the best animated shows of the last decade.
He's more right now. We're concentrating on superhero stuff, so that's what he's into at this point. So I'm going to follow.
DuckTales has superhero stuff. Gizmo Duck is in it.
Maybe I'll talk him into it.
David Tennant is Scrooge McDuck.
Wow. Well, that would be a big selling point. I'm not going to lie. I'm not going to lie. That would
the new DuckTales is like 50 episodes, and it's one story. Like it's a single continuous story.
I've heard good things.
And so is Mystery Inc. As far as Scooby-Doo is concerned, sir, get it together. You have this moment now. This is your watershed moment to finally push your son into the love of horror that you and I have grown up and had. And a good way of doing that is pushing the Scooby-Doo side of it, because you start to get that like creepy murder mystery side of things with an overarching story where it's also like campy and fun and all the things that you like about Scooby-Doo. But you can make him like horror in the process.
I could try. I'm not gonna lie. I don't think he's a horror guy, and it's kind of weird for me. I know it's her saying my son's not a horror guy, but my wife's not a horror person, so I think he takes after her. Not that he's scared, but he doesn't. I don't know. He doesn't seem to get it like I do yet, like we do. Maybe he'll get to that point. I'm gonna follow him down his path. Right now, I'm happy. I got a lot of fun already. I already got Spider-Man, Batman, the whole Batman series, and then X-Men, and then from there. So let's go there. I'm gonna go down that road first, and then we'll see where we are at the end of that, and then we'll find something else to try to maybe we'll push it at that point, see what we can do. So we'll find out.
You had a single moment here, man. The moment's fluttering away from you, and here's me trying to help you.
I'm happy doing Spider-Man. I'm happy doing Spider-Man and Batman right now. Let me tell you, I'm happy where I am. I'll deal with the future later when we get to it.
I can't even make fun of you and be like, man, you're a fucking child, when I'm sitting here being like, you should be watching DuckTales and Scooby-Doo. Like, I can't even be mad at you. And I can't even make fun of you for this because I appreciate it. But now I'm just like, I strangle you. You know what? How about that? Watch The Simpsons. There you go.
Well, we would do that, actually. He does watch The Simpsons. He likes The Simpsons, so we could definitely do that at some point. But you know what? We just talked about horror, And here it is, 35 minutes in. We haven't even talked about our episodes today.
I was good. I know. I was trying to push it. I was trying to, you put out that thing where you were like, we have to do a 4-hour podcast where eventually, we don't get to the movie
We
until like
will.
2.5 hours in.
We will
I
have to.
was
We will have to beat Gorley and Rust. One of these days we will. Can't be today, unfortunately. I do have stuff to do after later on. I
See,
pick
you
up the
didn't
wave
tell
at
me
some
this
point.
before we started.
You're right. You're right.
Like if I had known that, I wouldn't have rambled for so long at the beginning.
It's all good. It's all good. It's all good. We do a 30-minute normal. 30 minutes are normal. Let's be honest with you. Like this is not out of the ordinary for people at this point. So what are we talking about today? I don't even know.
All right, Dad, let's get everything on track, I guess, because you're being like that today. All right, Dad, calm down. I got you. We're gonna go ahead and get in that way back machine. Now we are in the summer of 1981, and Steve Miner has been chosen to direct his first film ever that he has done, coming off the success of the original Friday the 13th. 4 months after the fact, they were out in the middle of the woods shooting Friday the 13th Part 2 under the direction of Steve Miner. Adrian King would return for one last battle with Jason, and Amy Steele would be our new final girl, Jenny Field. But here we are, 1981. The body count continues. What a great tagline, by the way, that we ended up with. And
that is great.
The funny thing being, similar to Halloween, Friday the 13th Part 2 was not supposed to be a continuation. It was originally supposed to be the next Friday the 13th film about something that happened on a Friday the 13th. We were going to anthology the shit out of this series.
Well, of course, because I mean that's kind of the insane thing you got to do. Because Sean Cunningham said it best in an interview later on. He's like, "Well, we're doing a sequel, but our villain is dead and our heroes are dead except for one. Like, what do we do?" But at the same time, this is actually made. We're going back in that Wayback Machine to a much simpler time, way before the internet, way before pundits, way before.
It wasn't nearly as simple as we want it to be made out to be, though, either, because fans were still rabid lunatics. Again, across the pond, Doctor Who was already having its own issues.
Right. But at the same time, this is the kind of film. This sequel could not be made today because, quite frankly, there's a lot of I don't give a fuck about this sequel that they had to say in order to make it work. Like the idea of, well, Jason's mom's dead. Who's going to be the killer? Well, it could have to be Jason. You had the kid Jason at the end of the first one, and he was kind of like not there. Now he's a grown up, and now he's. How did he live? What? We're not going to say how. We just don't give a fuck. We're just going to say it's Jason, and then we're going to live with it and move on. And that's
pretty much what we did.
It is. There's no rhyme or reason for it. Nobody really cares. Like you think about it, like nowadays, I'm watching this movie. That's what I started talking about when I saw some things that it seems weird now. Like I look at this, I'm like looking at it from a 2020 perspective. It just makes no sense, and it's like, but no one cared. No one gave a fuck. But like people totally have blown that up today. Like it's a horror movie, so but it still needs that sense of logic. We're just making a
at the same time, the movie also still kind of plays into that, right? Because ultimately, at the end of the day, the question becomes: did Alice even did Alice actually meet Jason? Did he actually attack her? Because the opening of the movie, we're quickly shown her having a nightmare about it, and it does the bad Rocky IV director's cut thing where the first 10 minutes of the movie is us just watching the footage that we had already seen. But this is also pre-VHS, right? Like
that's true. But Steve, this is an 87-minute film, and you just wasted 7 minutes on basically showing us Friday the 13th again.
Yes, correct. So we spend in a 87-minute film, the first 7 to 10 minutes is just basically footage that we have already seen, intercut with new footage of someone having a nightmare. So there is a little bit of that lingering. Did that actually happen? Right. Or when we see it at the end of Friday the 13th, is that actually that dream happening?
Right.
And we don't realize it till we watch part 2. You see what I'm saying? So you
absolutely.
can almost, it's the one explainy way bit. The one little fuck it. It's just in her mind. She knows Jason was real in some capacity, but
you have to do the work for it, though. Now, you have to do the work for it. And
because the other thing is, this picks up 2 months after the end of the first movie. So there's no way Jason went from being drowned, creepy, dead boy Jason to jacked, should be hanging out with James Gandolfini in The Sopranos, Jason.
Right.
Because the guy who plays Jason in this looks like he should be hanging out with James Gandolfini in The Sopranos. He just does. So I always just assume now, in my head canon of it all, in the little I'm gonna do the explainy bits, is oh, it was really just a dream. She was just, out on the lake hallucinating, falls in the water. That's when they save her. But then Jason really was there watching and decides to go after her in the end because he wants revenge for killing his mom because he's a mommy's boy.
Of course, behind the scenes, it's partially the reason why was because the actress Adrienne King was the victim of a serious stalking incident with regards to the
Yep.
original film. That someone really took it really far. Ended up like in her house, I believe, at some point. Like actually ended up in her house, and that's kind of like,
Mhm.
holy shit, that's very scary. So I don't
Well,
know
and
if I think.
she's
Go ahead.
yeah, and she has also talked about because of that, though, ultimately she also felt she got shafted. Like she was not happy about what they ended up doing with Alice.
Yeah. Right.
She's talked
Yeah.
about it a lot.
Well, they said that basically. She'd said in like in the documentary I watched, like she basically like they didn't give her any direction. They kind of said, "Okay, roll around in the bed, pretend you're dreaming, make up a conversation." She basically made up her own dialogue that she has in
Yeah.
the phone conversation, and then that's just about it. She dies. She opens up the fridge, sees the nice decapitated head of Mrs. Voorhees, like sitting there smiling at her, and then she dies. And that's it. That's your final girl. Like one of the most famous final girls in history, done in 10 minutes. Done in.
The irony being, like, it's so odd because imagine if Halloween 2 had opened like that,
Right?
right?
Yeah. I
People would
mean,
have
it's
been
one of the reasons
furious,
why
and You're gonna say
Resurrection
it,
is so
right?
hated.
Exactly. Exactly. This man, he gets it. He gets what I'm putting
Yes.
down here is exactly that. Like, we get mad about Halloween Resurrection doing that.
Right? It's
Now
such a disgrace to have your final girl killed off the next 10 minutes. It cheapens the first film, and it makes you automatically turn on the film that you're watching a little bit. It makes you have to work your way back into it. I got to be honest, I had to work my way back into this one a little bit about because I'm kind of like, well, why is like we spent all film rooting for her, and when she survived, we're like, yes, yes, yes. And now you're telling me, nope, that doesn't matter. She's dead in the next 10 minutes. 10 minutes later,
yeah.
2 months for the character, 10 minutes really for us, even though it's a year later. As far as film goes, especially if you're binge watching it now, it's like, all right. Now she's dead. Okay.
Yeah.
Why would we
Although,
at this
and
point?
granted, unlike, Halloween Resurrection, we had all come to love, Laurie Strode to that point, even though
Yeah.
at she'd only been in 3 movies to then versus the 2 here
Right.
because you get to Resurrection, that's the 4th, but, like,
Right.
even then, it just feels like a very weird choice, but it also feels like just do it to create the stakes because, well,
Huh?
someone clearly knows that she was there the night that
Yeah.
everything happened. So she
Right.
had to be dealt with, right?
Right.
Like,
Right.
so I do like it in a stakes sort of thing too, because the reason it's less slappy in the face to me comparative to Resurrection, you're taking a character who has had too much development to that point
Mhm.
and
Right.
doing that. Whereas this one, at least, also, it's not like they went out of their way to be like, oh, also, you had this big character develop moment where, she finally kills the person who has been chasing her the entire 3 movies, but actually she killed someone else by mistake. They
Right.
tossed her in a mental institution, and then her actual brother shows up and is like, sucks to be you. You're dead now.
Right.
Like,
Absolutely. I
you know,
agree. This is definitely far below the Laurie Strode level. But at the same time, it also
but it's
sets
still
off.
a bummer.
It is a bummer, and I remember the other time I was thinking about, like, the other one that comes to mind that really stuck with me as a kid or a teen when I was watching horror movies and really getting into horror movies, Nightmare 4. Actually,
Mhm.
we had 3 survivors for Nightmare 3, which does kill off the final girl kills off Nancy in the first from the first film.
Right.
And then part 4 comes around, and the 3 survivors, all 3 of them get toasted the first, like, 10, 15 minutes of Nightmare 4. It's like, what are we doing here? Like, I feel like horror movies sometimes lose sight of the fact that you could have characters besides the monster be, like, go along the
Reoccurring.
journey, reoccurring. Like,
Yeah.
that's the Donald Pleasance of it all, of Halloween.
Mhm.
Like Donald Pleasance was as big of as Michael Myers at the time, and if Donald Pleasance hadn't passed away, I think he would still be doing Halloween stuff. I think he would have been an H2O. Absolutely, he would have
Oh,
been
absolutely, he would have been.
and stuff like that. But yeah, those things, the kind of thing that gives you something else to hold on to, you something else you're excited to see. So wiping him out, I think, is a mistake, and I think it was a mistake here. I'm not gonna lie, I think it was a mistake here. I would rather have just had her not in the film at all. It would have made sense
Well,
if she
that's
wasn't in the film at all,
and to
and
your
then we
point,
just
that's the one thing that Scream has figured out, for better
yeah,
or worse, depending on who you talk to. But like the thing that I like about Scream is that so many characters have survived the incidents to date that it actually fleshes out the world, because you have to believe, like, in a world like that, these ones that they've created, I do like this idea that some of these people actually survive, and how do you deal with that? And now you're stuck in the next cycle of
right.
you don't want to be involved, but you have to be because you want to stop this from happening. And I actually like that, and it's funny because the one thing that would make a great legacy sequel nowadays would be making a movie where say you made a Friday the 13th now, where any surviving final girls or final guys team up,
Right.
you know? And
Your experiences
it's
and
funny
stuff, yeah.
because the sequel to Freddy versus Jason versus
Was
Ash,
gonna
the
do
second
that.
comic series they did, actually deals with a group basically that is like an Avengers-esque final,
Portals,
boys and
right.
girls. Yeah.
Yeah.
Where
No,
they
I've been
decide
reading
to
that
stick
the
together.
writer, because the original writer of the comic was pitching that as a movie at one point, and it never got made, unfortunately, but that was the idea. Yeah, that would have been great to see them on screen together. Holy shit. Speaking of that, I mean, speaking of Final Girls, this is what I wanna say. I'll put this down right here. We're not quite there yet, but we'll talk about it. Yeah, I think this is my favorite. This might be my favorite Final Girl of the series, and it's actually a
Oh,
shame we never
easy.
got to see her again. Shame we never
Ginny
got to
is
see her again.
Yeah, Amy Steele's fucking awesome in this movie as
She's
Ginny.
wonderful. That
She's
character
a
is so
wonderful
well
character, and it's funny because when you first start to meet her, they really set her up to be so similar to Alice at one point,
right.
and then they
Yeah.
go a totally different direction with it. And
Yep.
I like that because she ends up being this, like, very confident, very strong character who, for all intents and purposes, you kinda don't know if she's gonna make it that far, and she ends up, like, really going for it, and it's awesome.
Yeah. No, because she's not at all the typical, like, just typical final girl. She's very strong. She's very smart. She's very she's put together well, and she doesn't always make dumb decisions. Even under grace, she has a lot of grace under pressure. Yeah, she makes some dumb mistakes that we all would make when we're trying to run away for our lives. But she also has some quick
Yeah.
thinking moments as well that really kind of spark your interest. You're like, this girl is a worthy opponent for our villain here, despite everything else going on. As well, the only issue becomes is like the fact is that when you have the final girls, you kind of can usually can kind of pick out who the final girls are right away, or the final people are right away, and the rest becomes it's a
Right.
horror problem in general, because the rest becomes okay. We're going to insert teenager archetypes for everybody else, and that's always kind of like a tricky thing for horror films to do, because you got to really make it worth your while to care enough about the other people, even if they're going to die, or at least or make you hate them enough so that they do die, you're rooting for their deaths in a way. It's just that tricky thing that the horror films have to do, and I do think this one was actually very successful with that one, with that part of it. I think.
Well, and I think that a lot of it also comes to is that I actually like most of the characters in this
Yeah.
movie comparative to the first one. Like, remember how I was like, I ultimately really don't care about the counselors or any of it? Everyone here is actually seemingly having like a really fun time being in the movie.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the characters feel a little more fun. And maybe it's just because the first one has that weird air of mystery that I know that's the point of it, but because I so prefer what Friday becomes versus what it started as,
Hmm.
this feels like the prototype of what Friday the 13th should be, where the characters are actually kind of fun and likable. And yeah, not everyone's great. Like Paul's kind of an asshole. Like, but at the same time, you're really pulling for Ginny and you really like the Sandra character and like, all these different people along the way that you meet.
Yeah, and even Paul is an asshole. It's not like because like, you could choose to have someone be an asshole, and that's their character trait. Paul has asshole moments, but he also has some really solid moments, like when he covers for the kids who went over to Camp Blood, and the cop is after him. I mean, he covers for them pretty well. And he has moments of good things at the end with Ginny as well. I mean, so like you don't ever really go, I hate these characters, I hate this character. You still enjoy what they're doing overall. So it makes a difference. So when they do meet their end. Or Paul, in this case, we have no idea what his end is. That's part of the problem with the ending. We'll get to there at some point. But it makes a difference, and I think you are absolutely right. We have some cool character moments, some good people in here. Yeah, I like these.
I mean, I'm just gonna say it right now, like you have characters like Mark Jarvis, who ironic, his name is Jarvis also, just because later how much that's important to the franchise. But like that character is so fun.
Yeah.
He just really is. Like and he gets arguably one of the most iconic kills in the franchise to boot. Like this is also the movie that, at least to me, you really had to try to up the ante in some capacity. And I like a lot of the kills in this one more than the first one because they start to try to be a little creative with it. Because
Right.
Jason is a more animalistic version of Jason in this movie. And so because of that, the deaths are a lot more interesting.
Agreed. It's definitely an interesting time for Jason. I mean, that's the one thing I wanted to say, like overall, is that this really, to a degree, feels like an in between Friday the 13th. Like it's one of those weird sagas where like a lot of horror films, a lot of horror franchises, they bank on their first film, and then everything else afterward is kind of building out the lore from there. And they kind of like fall flat eventually by like maybe by 4 or 5, and like they're not quite the same anymore. Friday the 13th really doesn't hit its stride until probably its full stride until like the fourth film. This doesn't feel like a Jason movie, and partially it's because of his look. I mean, to be completely honest, his look is ridiculous. I mean, it's ridiculous.
I disagree.
I
I
think he looks
fucking
like a
love
reject.
Baghead
I
Jason.
think I think he looks like a Hills from Hills Had Eyes reject. That's what he looks like at this point. He doesn't look like Jason at
It is
all.
someone just looked at the sun who the town that dreaded sundown and decided that they just wanted to use that. And I'm fine with that.
Like, but it to me, the reason why I don't like it is that it takes me out and like makes me feel like less of a Friday the 13th movie. Because I'm kind of like, this just feels like another. It almost feels like a Friday the 13th ripoff in a way, even though it's the original Jason. Like but you understand what I'm saying, that you don't get to the iconicness of the character until part 3. And then part 4 is where it really hits its stride. It's so different than other horror films. Like Nightmare on Elm Street begins with the first one. It's pretty cut and dry what that character is.
Same with
I mean, yes,
Halloween.
he gets comedic, but it's still based in the first one. And same with Halloween. It doesn't change much. This like takes a while to get Jason there. Jason feels like a ripoff character in this one a little bit, to be honest with you. And then
it's funny because right, whereas I'm very curious about that because one of the things I like about Jason in this so much is he feels so animalistic and feels so different because to me, I kind of like that it feels like he never would have gotten involved in this and done any of this if his mother hadn't been murdered.
Right.
And so now suddenly he's thrust into it. And, the weird cut here is that we jump ahead 5 years after the 2 months later prologue. And the movie never says that or anything, but there's a 5-year jump from the opening of the film to where we end up.
Does it ever say it? Does it ever say it? I think it might
No.
say at some point. Like I think at some point during the film later on,
Maybe.
it's just about 5 years ago this happened or something like that. Maybe
Basically, but like it's
but
you're
not
not
right away. Right.
you're not right away told, hey, X thing happened. And this is again
Right.
because they're also trying to get themselves back out of like the hole that is, well, the original movie starts in like 1957 or whatever it is. And so they're trying to like push the time frame up. So they're trying to make it modern,
Right.
which is very, very hysterical to me.
Yeah, it is. It is very hysterical. I think it's kind of fun. I know other podcasts have tried to do it. Like I know Gorley and Russ try to do it, and others have as well. Kind of set up the actual timeline of these Friday the 13th movies, and it gets ridiculous, and it's pretty much impossible. Because let's be honest, they don't give a fuck about canon, generally speaking. We already know that.
No, this series gives 0 fucks about canon. No world, just doesn't matter. Canon is not a thing
out
here.
the window.
Out the window, with as is logic.
Yes.
But one of the things I like about Baghead Jason, and it's actually funny because we'll get to it in '09 as well. Part of what I like about it is as weird as it is to say, Baghead Jason looks like the kind of thing that you would actually run into in life in some capacity. Obviously, as we know that there is a with the rise of stuff like the Ku Klux Klan over history and the iconic look of them wearing the hoods and things like that, and then to see like the sundowning towns and the people who would like, there's almost a weird horror iconic element of that in real life that
Mm,
makes him very unnerving
mm,
because there's a very weird cross dichotomy, if you will, of people who dress like that doing that being those people.
yeah,
And so there is a real fear to tap into if you see someone wearing a hood coming around killing people that feels very scary to me because it's the kind of
I get
thing that
that.
you can see historically has happened. Now, granted, I am a person that is white, so I necessarily wouldn't
You are
be on the end of seeing that. But at the same time, if you come between that at the same time and what we've seen in how things have played out, people still act like this and go after people. And
right.
so that feel of him having that feels like a very primal reaction to how do we creep people out because we know that people have dressed like this and hurt people. And then
Mm,
to let that version of Jason also tap into that, like, animalistic side where he's a lot quicker and feels a little more methodical at times about what he's doing instead of it being like Jason having arrows and things, right? There's
I can
something
get that. I
very
understand that.
yeah, it's a grittier, down to earth Jason, as
And I
weird as
guess
that sounds.
I like all of what you're saying. I just don't necessarily like it on the Friday the 13th movie. I think
No,
that's
for
what
sure, and
and that's what it
I
is.
hear you, and I understand it,
Yeah.
but for me
Okay. It
that is
works.
what continues to make this movie stand out and makes it so scary to me, and I
Gotcha.
love that,
That's cool.
and
Okay.
that is yeah, yeah, and that is why I've loved this movie for so long, is that I think that this one is the necessary stepping stone to the Jason that we both love when you get
Mm,
to part 4,
right.
but in order to get there, I like that we start with this because once he becomes supernatural Jason, it's great and fun and dumb and cheesy and amazing. But I love that, like any origin story, right? There's kind
Right.
of this idea of I like that there's this grounded version of him that you would never believe eventually becomes that, but he does.
Right.
And that's kind of fun.
Yeah, no, I get that. I get that. I can understand that. Again, I don't really I have a hard time keeping that in mind when I'm watching it because I'm supposed to be watching a Friday 13th film. But I definitely see where you're coming from. But what I do want to ask is how does he know how to take the kettle off the boiler?
That is the funniest moment to me in this movie that he is like, "Hey, man, I know I just murdered you, but I don't want your house getting burned down. So let me take the kettle off of the hot
Off
oven
the-
thing and put it on this one so that it'll cool down and the house doesn't burn down."
like we see
Really
his
looking
shack.
out, that Jason guy.
I mean, we see his shack later on. He doesn't seem to be having an oven at that in that shack down there. I mean, I don't know. Maybe it's just, maybe I don't know where he's learned these skills over the years. Um,
I mean, he had a Mama Voorhees. We met her.
That's true. That's true. That's true. Maybe he was old enough to see it. I guess it's possible. I guess it's possible. Maybe Mama Voorhees told him, and we just didn't hear it because it was in his head. Um,
Hey, man, Mama Voorhees was probably showing in, like, the, Smokey the Bear commercials, and he may have taken to heart that only you can prevent forest fires considering he lives in the woods. So
yeah,
he's
they
like,
didn't.
"Look, man." Yeah, I'm just saying, like, maybe those Smokey the Bear ads were very effective on him growing up. Maybe they made it all the way to the East Coast, and that's where it was.
Maybe that's a secret link. Maybe if you show up wearing a Smokey the Bear costume, he'll let you live.
You imagine a movie where Jason is tailing someone, and then one of them just decides to dress as Smokey the Bear, and oh, he's like,
Only
"Man,
you. Yeah.
yeah," and he's like, "Shit, I thank you for, all this time that you have helped me prevent forest fires, Mr. the Bear."
Jason
Like,
gives him a hug.
Yeah, like Jason just gives him a hug and goes about his business, and that is the one final person who is like, "What just happened? I can't believe that worked."
Okay.
It just keeps going. Like I need that now. I need Jason versus Smokey the Bear.
Let's do it. Let's do it. Let's get that. Let's pitch that. That should be absolutely the next film. Billions of dollars. Count it.
The
Take it to the
13th
bank.
the 13th film of the franchise is Jason versus Smokey the Bear. What a
Return to his
natural
roots.
follow-up to Freddy versus Jason.
Okay. I'm convinced.
I want this now to happen. I don't know why, but it's now out there. I need to see Jason fight a bear.
Is it a cocaine bear though? Maybe because maybe at this
you
point,
could put a cocaine bear in there.
Smokey. I mean, I think that like he's a little older now. He's out of work. You don't see much about her. The grizzled old vet. He doesn't see much time anymore. He's spending his royalty checks on like strippers and coke.
So he becomes the cocaine bear.
He becomes the cocaine
Smokey
bear.
becomes the cocaine bear.
That
okay,
is Smokey
all
Bear,
right. And Jason, so Jason is so upset by this, he decides he has to kill Smokey the Bear because he's no longer the bear he knows.
That's right. He is soiling the good name and good legacy of Smokey the Bear.
I am giving you $10 million to make this movie go. Like, I want someone to have that. I want to give someone $10 million to just make Smokey the Bear versus Jason. Smokey the cocaine bear, mind you.
How are we still a podcast? I don't know. How people listening doesn't have it shut us off by now? I don't know. You're still with us. I appreciate you.
Because the internet is forever, and the internet has given everyone a voice. And some of us have decided to use that voice to put Jason versus Smokey the cocaine bear.
Oh, God. Okay. Let's do it. Let us do it. Moving on.
Just think about this, man. Just think about the idea of Jason hunting a cocaine bear in the middle of the woods. And then he's mad because the cocaine bear is killing the counselor. So he's losing out on what he normally does. So now Smokey has also crossed the line because he's also taking Jason's normal victims.
Not in my camp. I'm the killer in this camp.
Exactly. So he takes it personally. I mean, the showdown has to be in a fiery version of Crystal Lake at that point, right?
Absolutely.
And Smokey has to be real mad because he goes, "You could have prevented this forest fire." Ooh. And Jason goes, "No, you could have." And he takes the machete and just knocks his head off.
Yes, because Smokey that's what snaps Smokey out of his funk. He sees that forest fire and he goes back. He's like, "I gotta put that, I gotta put the gear on one last time."
Yeah,
one last ride with Smokey.
Oh my God, Arnold Schwarzenegger absolutely has to voice Smokey in this.
Oh yes.
Oh yes. That's the movie right there.
Yeah, I love it.
Jason versus Smokey the cocaine bear.
We could just print money.
How are we not in charge in Hollywood?
I have no idea. They're missing out on gold like this? No idea. We could go in there, solve the strikes, solve world peace, solve world hunger, and give you quality films like Jason versus Smokey the Bear.
Tell you right now, not a single fucking AI could have written that movie better than we just did.
Absolutely not. AI. Fuck that.
Who needs AI when you have Paul and Paul and PJ?
Exactly. Bingo. But back to this film now. Back to this film.
There is a cocaine dog in this, or a hot dog rather.
Yeah, there is. I love that transition, by the way. Dog and hot dog. No, I mean the movie. I mean when they show the dog.
I don't care. I'm going to take credit regardless. I knew exactly what you meant, but I still want to take credit.
All right, you can take credit. Okay.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Anyway, we jump into the next sequence. We get to 5 years later. We get Paul is opening up the school camp for counselors. We get to meet some of these counselors. And we get to meet, of course, late is Ginny. Late, what is it? Fashionably late? Yeah, because her car doesn't work. I don't know. Either way. I like we said before, we like these characters. I like what you said about we did have Mark Jarvis. I wonder if he's related. Do we know? Is there any way we could find out? Maybe his cousin or something.
I will look right now. I'll see if I can find information.
But it's kind of funny. I gotta be honest with you. I have to ask you this, and I know the '80s are a time of where sensitivity is not exactly at its height.
There's
Do we
no
think?
relation to future protagonist on
Okay,
the film.
that's fine. Do we think that they put him in a wheelchair? Like they thought of the set, like they said, we're gonna have a death where the wheelchair goes down the stairs. Guy in a wheelchair goes
Oh
down the
yeah,
stairs. So like we need somebody in a wheelchair. That's you.
yeah. I
Instead of
think
me
that's
like just
exactly.
creating somebody, instead of trying to be inclusive and like creating somebody else, that's totally not what this was, right? This is totally just
No, this
this
was
is gonna be
totally.
fun,
They decided that they were gonna have him take a machete to the face and push him down the stairs.
which was an iconic kill. I can't lie. It was an
It's
iconic kill.
it's one of the it's one of the all-time great movie kills.
Yes, absolutely.
It just is.
Um,
And I
um,
gotta say, man, like Tom McBride is very fun in this movie. Rest in
yeah,
peace. He died in the
yes,
'90s, but he's so charming in this and so talented, and like he's really good in this, and they all are. That's the thing. All of them
yeah.
are.
They're all likable. That's the thing. They're all
Yeah.
likable. Like not one of them is someone you don't want to hang out with or whatever. I mean, like even the Joker Stu, who usually sometimes they can go over the top. They can go to like be annoying with their humor sometimes. Like he's even good. He's just kind of fun. Although I do find it funny, I will say like that this is one of the few films that really eschews a typical horror trope. Usually, when you get that Joker, that practical Joker, he is the loner, but he also definitively gets killed before the end of the movie because there's no way he makes it. But he doesn't die in
Right.
this film. He stays out at the bar and he is living as far as we know. As far as we know, anyway. Unless
Yeah, he's real lucky. He got to get the hell out of Dodge, and he survived all of it. He never goes back.
stayed at the bar with the bartender who didn't really seem to like him. Maybe she liked him by the end. Hopefully, he just didn't drive home. That's all at that point. So, but I liked him. I thought he was good. It's funny, actually. I mentioned I talked to him, or I talked to him. I saw this the documentary with him, and he talked about how he was in Christine as well, and he said he doesn't die good on screen. He said that
Oh
might be the
yeah,
reason
because they cut
why
his scene from Christine as well.
they, they cut a scene from Christine. So I think that he might not have died because he was just not a good dyer on screen. Maybe that's the case. But you know what?
Yeah, it's just
Also, this film doesn't really seem to care much about where the characters end up. Like at the end of the day, like it's like at the end, like where are these people? Who cares? It's over. We're good.
yeah, that's pretty much accurate, actually, man. Like this movie also has no, yeah, it has no care for actually giving us any like real character development or where did this person end up? Like no, it's also just about you like them, they're all fun, but Jason's also slowly murdering them one by one.
Right. Absolutely. Um, so we get
I'll
some.
say too.
Go ahead.
Oh, to that point, this movie is fantastically paced comparative to the first one.
Yes. I mean, it
It
helps. It's
it
only
feels
80
like a
minutes long
rocket.
after the recap.
Yeah,
Basically, it does. Yeah, it
yeah.
doesn't waste any time at all. It's all about like basically getting to you get to the camp. You introduce the characters in brief signets. You start killing them off, and then it's kind of just drives on through to the end. So yeah, it's very very quick. And that's a good thing for horror films. I think sometimes a lot of horror films you can waste a lot of time and you kind of get out of the momentum if you start trying to do a slow burn horror film. I should say slow burn slasher film. There's some slow burn horror that works very well, but not in slasher films
Yeah,
like
but it's
this.
not for stuff like this, and for this movie
Um,
in particular, because the first one, as I said, like it's very, very methodically paced, and for
right,
90 minutes, it feels very long. It,
right,
it's just not as fun, and I know that that's a not necessarily what people want to hear, but like it's just true. Like the first one's just not nearly as fun as this. And I just find
agreed.
everyone so likable and it makes this so easy to watch. And like you from the opening moments, honestly, when we see the boots walking down the street and you realize what's going on, it's a lot more intriguing already.
Yeah,
And then
right,
the fact that the pace is just so like ripcord at that point, because we skip all of the Ginny being picked up and taken into town and dealing with like she is just dropped off. They make a phone call and like then we're at the camp and we're going through the
right,
camp and the counselors are doing the camp stuff and like
right.
this movie is just rolling. Although we do get Crazy Ralph back and the you're doomed, which is
Yeah,
fantastic.
yes, but man, why did they kill him off? Why did you kill Crazy Ralph? He's not the one you kill off. I'm sorry, like that was like actually one of the biggest mistakes of the movie. It was almost not quite Randy level in Scream 2, but to me, I'm kind of like, you could have this character come back all the time. Like by the time 4 or 5 rolls around, he could actually have joined the kids and really been like a bastion of knowledge and a bastion of information to help them out. Well, kind of like what we were talking about before with the Final Girls. It just feels like that was an unnecessary elimination. Keep Crazy Ralph. Especially because, like, later on, I believe later on the series, you actually have someone, I believe it's in part 3, or probably part 3, maybe part 5, where there's a similar Crazy Ralph-like character that comes out briefly. That's not the same.
Yeah.
Keep Walt Courtney in the role. I think it was a mistake for them to kill him off. I don't know. That's just me.
I
get
mean,
passionate about
look,
some of these things.
I would have been totally down for more Crazy Ralph, but he's not really a character at the end of the day. Like, we don't know anything about him. So
But
to
he
bring
could
back
have
another
been.
familiar character, he could have been, you're right, but he wasn't at this point. And because I love the joke of the you're doomed, and then Doom catching up with him just makes me happy. So I can't really be mad about it.
All right. All right. It made me mad. I'm not going to lie. I watched it again. I'm kind of like, son of a
Hey,
bitch.
look, I get it. Maybe he should have survived, right?
Right.
At least to part 3, but
Right.
he just wasn't adding anything. And I kind of like that there's also this idea that everyone thought he was crazy the whole time, and they all could have survived had they just listened to him. And after a while, they were like, man, nah, he's just crazy. And yet he kept trying to tell people. And Jason's like, man, I've had enough of you. Like, I'm done with you telling people about my business. Leave me alone. So he kills it. That's street justice, is what that is, Paul.
Street justice. Okay, that's fair. That's fair. You damn snitch. Stitches get stitches, or
Yeah. Yeah,
slashes. Stitches get
exactly.
slashes.
So Jason was having it with Crazy Ralph, and he was like, "That's it. You're cut off. We're done here. This is street justice, motherfucker." Like, that was what it was.
My God. My God. Oh well. Let me talk about the cop. Um, that I got okay. The cop was a scene. Obviously, we have
Deputy
the 2
Winslow.
kids. Yes, yes, Winslow. We had the 2 kids go off to visit camp. That one girl, man, she's kind of freaky. I think she's kind of getting off on that. I need to visit the murder ground. She just seems
I mean, those
really
people
into it.
exist, to be fair.
That's true. Oh, absolutely.
And we
I'm not
shouldn't
saying it's a wrong
and
thing.
you know what? We shouldn't kink shame. If you wanna go have sex in a graveyard in the murder house, by all means.
By all means, if that's what gets it for you, go for it. I mean, I consider it a little freaky, but that's fine by me. I don't mean freaky in a bad way. It's a little freaky. Winslow comes up on them, they get in trouble, and this is where Winslow, this is what I talked about before. Paul kind of backs them, and like this because the cop is very much a anti-kids kind of thing at this point. But I gotta be honest with you, I don't know about you, but this is one of the only deaths I felt like we need to stretch the timeout. Like I feel like we need to stretch this time out a little bit. We have only 80 minutes. We have like 60 minutes or 70 minutes of film. We need another death in there. Let's get this cop in there, and the cop will chase Jason down. Because all of a sudden Jason's running across the street in like daylight. That's where
Yep.
the cop rolls up on him running across the street. Seems very out of character. Runs away. We do get the introduction of the shack there, which is kind of cool, and a nice introduction to the shack at least. But then his
Yes,
death is
I
kind
agree
of
with that.
but so it does end up having a good solid point to it. But I feel like the cop is great just to kind of push things along a little bit. But I will say that because like of the introduction of the shack, this film doesn't do a good job of kind of having its own determination of how things are going to go. Like, for example, the fact that the car doesn't start later on when Ginny jumps back in it, the fact that they preset that with the car has troubles
Right.
all the time anyway, instead of just the typical, like, oh, the car all of a sudden just suddenly doesn't start out of nowhere. This actually has a reason, and I set justification that way. Getting the shack this way was also kind of similar along those lines. Like we see the shack, we know what when she finds the shack, we know what this shack is and why it's dangerous at that point.
Well, that's one of the things that I actually like in the movie is that they do set that up, which is usually an afterthought in some of this stuff because
Right,
we joke about it all the time. Horror movies, you just kind of leave logic out the window, right? Like,
right, absolutely,
that's just what we do. We're not great at it, but or we're good at that actually. We're really good at just letting logic fly out the window, and it is what it is.
right,
But I kind of dig here that they actually go out of their way because you can tell they're actually trying to make a horror film and treat
right.
it with a little bit of dignity because they know that we're already asking a lot of the audience to accept the Jason of it all and what it is trying to do. And so I kind of dig that they actually plant little things like that throughout. And also, again, being so forward thinking on we have a character in a wheelchair, that fucker's going down a wheel of stairs. It's just gonna happen.
You knew it was. You knew it
Yeah.
was. As soon as you saw it,
Or
like, it was right at the
staircase.
beginning of the
We're
film,
pushing the wheelchair down the staircase is the
something,
sentence I meant to say.
right? Because when you saw the guy, you see the counselor in the wheelchair, and all of a sudden they make a couple of big shots of these long sets of stairs. You're kind of like, yeah, this is definitely going to happen at this point.
Yeah.
One thing I wasn't a big fan of, I gotta admit, I was and I wasn't. It's a tease with the dog. So I forget the character's name now. The one of the characters has Muffin as a dog. I remember the dog's name, but not her name. Um, is it? Oh God, I don't remember who it is. So this is gonna be annoying me.
I do not remember her name, I'm gonna be honest.
Yeah, all right, that's fine, I guess. Either way, I know it's Scott Terry. That's it, Terry. Terry is
Yes.
the girl. Yes. So Terry has Muffin. Terry loses Muffin, and then when the kids go out to go to blood camp, they find a dead dog that looks a lot like Muffin, like chewed up and like all sorts of beat up. Which is like, to me, I'm kind of like, this is not Michael Myers. God damn it, we don't need the dog deaths here. But then also later on, we find Muffin alive as they fake out at the end. So I'm like, what was that dog then? The exact same dog was all chewed up and now Muffin's alive. I don't know. That's a weird fake out to me. Gotta be honest with you.
Well, because I always just assumed that at the end, that is not actually Muffin. I think it's similar to the end of the first one. I think it's a dream sequence.
Okay, could be, absolutely.
Because I think once you get to the end, then it's like that slow pan up on Pamela's face. It
Right,
seems like it's all just kind of a setup for she kind of just snaps while she's in the cabin
right,
and knows everything that's happened, and she had to pretend to be Mama Voorhees, and she escapes, and she just kind of goes wild, you know?
right.
That at least that's how it felt to me.
Yeah, okay. I guess I could see that possibly. But speaking of Terry and Muffin, I do find it funny. It's the typical horror thing. Goes off by herself on a walk. She has to go strip strip down to her to nothing to go for a swim, because that's what we all do. We all just decide to go swimming by ourselves
Yeah,
in
of
the nude.
course. I mean,
Not anything to do with a
wouldn't
horror
you?
film. Absolutely.
Just
Of course,
saying.
it does come into play when Scott does see her and teases her. He's our pervert of the film. There's always at least one who's a pervert in the film, and that's our boy Scott this time around. One thing I want to say, because Scott gets killed nearly first, like he gets this throat slash with the flat side of the machete, by the way, which is the weird thing. I don't know if you noticed that or not. He gets cut with like the wrong side of the machete. It's a little
Yeah, and
off,
it's
not gonna
funny
lie.
because yeah, I mean, they clearly were just trying to keep him safe, and it's just one of those,
Yeah,
"Ah, I hate that I know that's the dull side of the blade." You
yeah.
know, like, I wish I didn't know that, but it is.
Yeah, I will say here's by the one. If I had one, I kind of wish we could put part one and part two together to make one really great movie. I kind of feel like that's what I'm missing here because like one thing from one that's missing from two, the kills aren't as good overall in two. The wheelchair one aside, they're just not very classic, and that's partially because Tom Savini stepped away, decided to do The Burning, which was actually kind of a Friday the 13th ripoff, which is actually very good, though. I actually watched it. I enjoyed The Burning quite a bit. But they had the up and comer, the more up and comer. I forget. God, I'm so blanking on his name on these names right now.
Well, I really would have
So
loved to have Stan Winston. I was so excited with
I
the
heard
idea of
Winston was
Stan
going to
Winston.
be,
Yeah, which then he had to drop out because he went to do something else.
and it was
Um,
a young guy who came in, and it wasn't like he was bad necessarily, but it could have been much better. Carl Fulton, that's Carl Fulton who did it. But it obviously was a step down from the legend of Tom Savini or someone like a Stan Winston would have been. So the deaths don't look as good in this one. I don't know. Do you agree with that overall?
I disagree with you. I actually think
Okay.
I like I said, I actually think that there's more deaths in this one that are a little oddly more iconic for me than
Really?
that. Now granted, maybe you're right, like nothing reaches the full level of say the arrow coming out of the neck in the first one, but we also know that the MPAA had that movie cut up a lot, and I think it would have looked different had we gotten like a fully uncut version because when you see some of
Possibly.
that footage of like the the spike through the bed of the couple,
Right.
that's a great kill, and it looks fantastic.
See,
Similarly, like,
to me,
I
I
don't
want to
know.
interject on that one. To me, in that one, I kind of felt like it was a rehash. I'm like, okay, we had the neck through the bed last time, and now we're just going to try to do it the other way. And it felt like, all right, we're going to rehash it, but it's not nearly as good looking. That's what it kind of felt like to me.
Interesting. See, I always liked that kill
Okay, that's fair.
because I also like it being that he's killing 2 people at once like that, just very kinda like it feels a very Jason thing to do, you know?
I don't disagree with you there, but that's my problem. Is it kind of just felt like a repeat? I'm kind of like, okay, so Jason doing that Jason thing. I guess that's okay. I will say, because of the cop, the actor, I did like his death, the hammer to the back of the head, the claw hammer, because of his
Mhm.
reaction, really sold
That
it for
that
me.
that's my favorite kill in the movie
Yeah, it
because I
just
know you
it's
were gonna
something
ask me
raw
later.
about it. Yeah, that is okay. That's fair. I mean,
Well, that
I'll
and
go
then
back to
obviously the
the
wheelchair.
wheelchair. Yeah, the
Like,
wheelchair
the
is the
wheelchair murder
iconic one.
is
Right.
yes. But I actually
Um,
really love that, the hammer kill. I think that one's fantastic.
It's like because his eyes like pop open, like it's all about the actor in that one. But um, I don't love the blade across the throat. Again, it's kind of like normal, and again, like you said, like I said, the flat of the blade just kind of ruins it for me a little bit. Um, and then of course we don't even get Paul's death if he even died at all. I'm going to harp on that a bunch of times. Like I feel it's so strange that we have no idea what happened to Paul at the end of it. Not a clue. You know, at the end, she's like,
Yeah, and I love that they even
they
talked
don't even
about that.
fully
They were
ignore
like,
it. They don't even fully ignored it because she like when she's getting pulled in the ambulance. Where's Paul? Where's Paul? Where's Paul? No, we didn't find him yet. Okay.
that and that's why I assume, yeah, I think Paul was just kind of forgotten about and they never really dealt with him, which is very funny, but that's why I'm also convinced that it's a dream sequence. I think she
Yeah.
thought she saw Paul and nothing really comes from it.
I guess that's
But it's just very
possible.
funny to me.
Yeah. Um. Yeah. But I don't know. All right. So we have them going to town, and we have them at the bar.
Where
While
they
the
were
other stuff is
shooting
going on.
and actually drinking while making the scene. So they're
Right.
the drunker they are in the movie, that is not fake. That is no, they are actually that drunk because they were just drinking and that was it.
This actually was the best character development for Ginny. I feel like where she kind of like broke down and said, "Well, what if he's really out there?" I had this conversation with Paul, who's very dismissive about the whole thing about Jason, and rightfully so. I mean, most people honestly wouldn't have been on her side. Like, honestly speaking, it was kind of like she's saying, "Well, what if this man beast this urban legend is real?" And she's really serious about it.
But
But
she's also kind of oddly on his side.
yeah, yes, and that's what's kind of very cool about what actually works because they make mention that she's like a psychologist or child psychologist or child or
Yeah.
something like that. So it makes sense that she goes the route she goes. So I think it's actually a smart development for her character and for the action she takes at the end.
Yeah, I
It's,
love it. I actually love the whole sequence and I love that it's a moment that actually attempts to humanize Jason in her eyes because I think it's actually very important for the third act's big, move of her trying to pretend to be Pamela.
which we're gonna get to
And
that sort of thing, but yeah,
yeah, but I mean that without the buildup of her trying to reason with Jason instead of attacking him right away, like as she's trying to get away from him, I've always thought that that just works. It just makes sense.
right,
And it's a very nice beat that isn't necessarily one that you would see in other horror movies because ultimately you don't really want to humanize the monster, right? I mean,
right,
that at least in the slasher movies, ultimately that was one of the bigger problems with Rob Zombie's Halloween, right?
mhm,
You spent 45 minutes of the movie trying to humanize Michael when you didn't need to.
right.
In the same way that like you unless you're watching the Universal monsters, which the point of those is to
To
humanize
humanize
them,
them. Yep.
slashers are not meant to be humanized.
Or if they are, I like it sometimes when they have, like, the touch where, like, for a second, you kinda see something there, that can make it a little bit more, but if you go any more than that, it just becomes too much and too overwhelming and too you're
Correct.
trying to do too much for the genre you're in. The genre can't hold that kind of psychological weight, generally speaking. At least I haven't seen it done well enough yet to do it. So there's somebody out there who could do it probably.
I mean, look, I mean, arguably maybe the Scream movies, and that's only because the reveal of the killer is always someone who's been in the movie the entire time.
Right, right, and that's kind of
But
different, but
even
that makes for a
then,
different mark, yeah.
right?
Give
But
me
you're
you know,
not doing like this,
right,
where this is, Jason, the deformed child that lives in the fucking woods and wants to hang out with Smokey the Bear.
right.
Like, you don't need to humanize him.
No, these are entities of evil. Freddy, Michael, Jason, these are all entities of pure evil. Scream is just a murderer. Scream is like a psychotic person. These are not psychotic people. These are just evil and just entities of
And
evil.
that's yeah, 100%. And it's actually interesting because I think the one thing that the Child's Play franchise has done really fantastically over time is that it has 100% showed us the past of the Chucky character
Yeah.
and of where he came from, right?
Right.
But they don't attempt to ever humanize him really. Like
Right.
Charles Lee Ray was a psychopathic murderer. He
Right.
always was psychopathic.
Right.
They don't try to change that, and I like that.
I agree. I fully agree. I fully agree. Um, so basically, they're at the bar, and then Paul and Ginny return to the camp while Ted stays behind because they're still drinking and partying. Of course, everybody's dead
Good for
pretty
Ted.
much at this point. What was that?
Said good for Ted. Ted
Good for
deserved
Ted.
that.
I like Ted. I liked his jokes, which, by the way, were his own jokes. He said later on he
Yep.
got to just throw his jokes on screen, and that's why. So good for you. Good for you, Stu, who played Ted. Stu Chamo or Charno, rather. Sorry, Stu Charno. Also in Christine. Also in Just One of the Guys, and also in Once Bitten. Do you remember that movie, Once Bitten?
Oh my god, I haven't seen that
That's
in a long
something like
time.
we might have to do in in one of our. I think one of these days we're gonna have to do a horror like season of just like one offs, like all those that
Well,
don't have
we've talked about
franchises.
that too. Like
Right,
we have ideas for horror grab bag seasons
right,
of the show, basically,
right,
that also include like themes,
right, which would be cool. I'd love to do
which
that.
would be
So
very fun. So that could fall into that.
absolutely,
Because
definitely a comedy horror, but I mean a comedy horror for sure. But it's still fun.
you could do Shaun of the Dead in there too.
And we could do a lot of horror comedy. We could actually absolutely do. We'll get back
Fright
to that
Night.
stuff. Fright Night, yeah. I mean, in a way, Monster Squad would kind of fit that to a degree.
Hmm. Oh yeah, there's plenty of them out there. We can make this work.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll get back to this. We'll definitely get back to
I'll,
this.
I'll talk to the Cocaine Bear about it, and we'll figure it out.
Yeah, when Smokey comes back. When Smokey comes back. Is Smokey our new final girl? Maybe, I don't
I
know. We'll have
think
to see.
so. Smokey's the final girl.
There you go. I mean, we don't know if Smokey's a guy or girl, really. I mean, all bears have those low, grumbly voices. I mean, really, I don't know.
Oh my God, John Goodman should voice him instead of Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Oh, yes. That's masterful, PJ. That is masterful.
Yeah,
Give yourself a pat on the
yeah,
back. I love
yeah.
that.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. John Goodman is Smokey
Uh,
the Bear.
so anyway, Jenny and Paul make it back. And I love actually, this is where Jenny really shines. This is this last third of the movie. I love the fact that they're in that house and the lights are off, and Jenny just keeps saying, "There's someone in the fucking house. There's someone in this fucking
Hmm.
room, or whatever." That's fucking room. And she's right. And Paul's like, "What? And then, of course, Jason does appear, and we have the fight. And Paul gets kind of taken out there, but not killed because he has to go after Ginny next. That's the weird part about the possibility of him not surviving, because it is weird that he left him alive, but I mean, he was pretty intent on going after Ginny, who in a way does remind us a little bit of Alice. So I could see why that would be a little
That's really why. Again,
really
I mean, they even
intensely
make it a
focused
point
on
that
him.
she shows up similarly, right? In dropped
Right,
off by a trucker, et cetera, et cetera.
right, absolutely. Um, but then we
I
have the good
love this
chase.
third.
Yeah,
I
this third
love
actually is
this
really
third.
solid. I will say this is
Um,
my favorite part of the movie by far.
I also think this is when this third act is when the franchise becomes Friday the 13th.
Yeah,
This this last third of the movie is when the franchise fully clicks into the tortured final girl, the Jason, the movements, the chases, this is where we start to see Friday the 13th become Friday the
right,
13th.
Right.
And I love it for
Absolutely.
that. You see the seams. You see it really fully coming together, and that's very cool.
Yeah, absolutely. I do love the chase around. I think that I agree with 100%. This is where it fits for me. Ginny chasing Jason. We have to see Jason fully being Jason because, like, the whole first film was the whole we're seeing all the kills from the eyes of Mrs. Voorhees. It's the mystery. We get
Right.
that in the beginning of this film. There's like you see the boots. You get to see Alice killed in a similar fashion through the eyes of the killer to a degree. But this is where Jason really, and actually throughout the whole film, we kind of mostly start seeing pieces of it. Like we could see Jason cutting. We get to see
Yeah.
Jason kind of stomping, but it's not really, you don't see Jason full out until this part. This is where you really see everything, and this is where Jason really comes to be. It's a great moment where he is like stalking through the woods like an animal, like you said, carrying the pitchfork. It is, and again, this is where I love and don't love the hills. The hills have eyes reject look, but it does work. The animalistic side does work for it to a degree. It's like kind of like a
Mhm.
farmer gone mad, to be honest. A scarecrow gone mad, um, but
It
does
totally
but
is.
yeah,
And honestly, and we'll get to it obviously in the future, but like that was one of the things I really loved about 2009 was that they found a way to bridge that, like, him going from that to the mask in a way that made sense, but they really leaned in on Jason feels a very certain way when he has that bag on his head versus when he finally puts the mask on. And that's
right.
why Derek Mears is still my favorite Jason. I think he's fucking terrifying. And the scariest moment in the movie is him with the bag on his head for me. So that transference of from that to you look at this one, and it's like that is why I think I look at it so fondly too, is I just find it so scary. I really do.
That works. It works for you. I'm glad it works for you, man. Um,
Yeah.
I- so let's get to the big moment in this third act. Is obviously when Ginny makes her way to the shack, finds the shack,
We finally see the
finds
shack.
we see the shack in its full glory. We were there a little bit earlier with Winslow, but we get to see what Winslow saw because we didn't get to see what Winslow saw when he opened up. He opened the door, kind of got like, oh, what the fuck is this? And then got killed with the hammer. We get to see what that Jenny sees, the full on altar we have to Pamela Voorhees with the full on head, decapitated head, and everything else. And what a great moment for her to have this decision, a split decision to go, like, I know what Jason is. I've thought about this. Jason is
Mhm.
not necessarily evil. It is in her mind, he is an abused little boy who just loves his mommy. Everything he's doing is for mommy. He's fucked up. I could probably pull this off. Pulls a sweater on and starts talking to him like she's Pamela. And of course, the great Betsy Palmer comes back and does some voice sequences for her, which is great. I'm so glad she came back for it. So it worked so well. I love this is where the bag does work. So you do get to see that one eye, and he almost does look human here, almost
Yeah.
because he stops and thinks, and it's the one time he should in a way because he's dealing with his mother. He's the little boy again,
That's
and
the
I
one
love
thing
how
the
that works.
franchise still gets.
Yeah, absolutely.
Anytime this happens, it should be this way, where he has that moment of, "Oh, wait, that mom?" Like, that
Mhm.
should always be who he is, like, and
Right,
you see it because he's one thing Jason's very good at in the movies and the franchise as a whole is that, like, stop, the head tilt, the
right,
thinking side of Jason exists, you know?
right. It's very rare. It's not like Michael does a little bit of that too, but it's never the same type of thing. Because Michael is actually in his way a genius, like a genius savant, genius kind of in a way, like in his own fashion. Jason is a child, but he does have that moment of where he does have the human side of thinking. I mean, we said before he is pure evil, but he does have those little holes that only Mama Voorhees can get through.
Yeah.
And the best moment of the whole, I think one of the best moments of the whole thing is where he sees the face behind her, and then all of a sudden that's when the spell is broken. He's like, "Wait, what?" And then it all goes off at that point. But it's already too late because she does a good job with it.
I love the build to this, though. It's
Yeah.
so fucking cool, and it's so fun, and she's really winning him over too. That's what I love. Like,
Yeah.
also, can we just talk about how creepy it looks to have the headpiece of your mother in the middle of your goddamn house? Like what a
Mhm.
interesting set design and idea, right? That is
Yeah.
never a thing I would have considered, and God, is it freaking cool. It works.
Yeah. 100%. Might as well use it twice. The head at the beginning, might as well use the head at the end too, as well.
Yeah, but when
You,
you see it, like, in this shrine, it's a very different like, seeing it in
yeah.
the fridge where it shouldn't be as weird, don't get me wrong, but there's something about the fact that, like, Jason just leaves it with candles around it, and it's like a shrine in the middle of his
Yeah.
shack.
It is a little. It's very strange. I'm not gonna lie. Um, as you know, as I've said before, sometimes I have the movie playing in the background while we do our podcast, just 'cause I
Right.
like things to get inspired by. One thing I forgot to mention, I'm glad I wanted to mention, the fun thing, the one thing, the humorous bit I got, which is the over the top done, as far as I'm concerned, when she's under the bed and the rat or the mouse comes, and all of a sudden
Mhm.
they show her peeing, like Niagara Falls. She starts like peeing, like I don't even know how that happens because she's like under the bed and all of the pee comes like I don't even know how it gets that far because she's laying flat. It's like she's standing up, so it drips down. It's like comes out like a jet. Like that's a pee jet right there. A stream of pee that comes shooting out to cover the floor.
What
It
a
just
weird
made
thing
me
for
laugh.
you to decide to latch onto.
I,
Just gonna say
I
that.
just
What a weird thing for you to latch onto.
you're not wrong. You're not wrong. But I remember watching like I never even noticed it before. I remember watching it this time, and then you see the bed, and you just feel like that's just a lot of pee. Man, my God. I mean, she wasn't a bar, so I guess that makes sense. Uh, it's just a funny setup for me. I'm sorry. I'm
No,
sorry.
no,
Go.
you're fine. I just think it's funny that that's the one where you were, like, weirdly fascinated on because I wouldn't have considered that, but, like, you
It
know
just seems
what,
a little
man?
out of place.
You do you. Uh, I'll say it is, one of those, maybe we should think about this before we actually do it sort of
Right.
things from a
Yes.
producing standpoint and also just from, like, I wouldn't even know. I was gonna say more from just, like, the production side of the
Is
in
this
doing
worth
this, how do
this?
you make sure it looks right too? Like,
Right.
so I guess the effects side more than anything of can we make this work where it doesn't look like that? Because that's very just odd.
It is, and that's exactly what I'm saying. It's like, is it worth the I don't know, it's not necessarily a joke, but is it worth the shot to throw in there? You know, I mean, she was scared of the mouse or rat, obviously. She kind of like was just like, and the mouse goes away. Like to have her all of a sudden pee, just it's I had to like stop thinking, like, what is that? Is that that's supposed to be pee. Oh,
Yeah.
okay. So it kind of was distracting to be honest with you, but it is what it is.
Well, and then the funny thing is then of course Paul does show back up.
Yes, yes. After we get the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Jenny, I decided that I got. She obviously watched Texas Chainsaw Massacre because she's going to take a chainsaw and try to kill Jason, who, by the
Yeah.
way, again acts human a little bit. Actually, has is like actually Jason doesn't usually act scared, to a great degree, but this he actually whoa, he starts backing off of it, kind of thing, which is
Yeah.
an interesting tactic to take at that point. But
Well, again, I mean, as it turns out, he should have just been hanging out with the Sopranos. So, I mean,
that's
I gotta say, man, I really like Steve Skowitz in this. I think he's so fun as Jason. It's a very
yeah,
different performance than that, like what the series is kind of known for it to be, obviously in the future.
absolutely
But he sets the template in a lot of ways. He gets the stomping side of it. There's a lot of like the movements. Some of that is left over in other interpretations of the character, but this is very much his own. Like this Jason is very specific to this film and
right,
this performance,
right.
and it works really well. It works really well for me.
Well, I mean, they did have Warren Team Gillette play Jason a little bit also, but I guess there's some problems with him not wanting to do his own stunts, or he couldn't do the stunts, or he didn't like the
Well, it
makeup and
was
stuff.
mostly also him just in the unmasked parts, whereas they wanted
Yeah,
someone bigger and bulkier underneath.
which makes sense.
With yeah, when he
Yeah.
was masked.
So we get to the last part, obviously, and then there's the thing that you call a dream again, possibly a dream sequence, and could very well be. Who knows? That's where we get the Jason to the window, which is probably one of the most iconic moments from the film. Like this, if you talk about Friday the 13th Part Two, you think of basically the wheelchair death and Jason, unmasked Jason, flying through the window, um, and then it kind of ends. Which I don't know. It's kind of like I don't know if I love the cop out endings or not, the dream endings or not, because like all of a sudden like Jason flies through the window, and the next thing you know, she's waking up again, and like she's being helped by the cops and the ambulance people. It's like, and there's no Paul around. It's like, this is like, so basically it almost feels like, and this is a negative to me a little bit, and I get if you could ignore it, I totally get it. But for me, I sit there and go, so basically you just really didn't know how to end it, and you're like, well, just end it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, look,
just end
I
it.
100% agree with you, to be fair. And I mean, it's actually true though too, to some capacity, because we also know that there wasn't a version of the movie that ends with Pamela's eyes opening on
Right,
the,
that's true.
and then the producer's like, "Well, I was never actually going to do that. I wasn't serious about that." And it's like, "But you shot it."
Yeah.
Like, so there was clearly more there than not there. So why are we pretending it's not,
Yeah.
Like, they definitely chased this pretty quickly, because again, I said it up top, like, we were 4 months in, like, 4 months after the success of the first, they were already shooting this movie.
Yeah.
So there was not real thought put into it. Like, let's
Right.
call a spade a spade. There was some thought put into it, but it's also very clear that they were kind of riding by the seat of their pants, because they
Right.
had a hit and they knew that they needed to capitalize.
Right. Absolutely. That's the way it is. I'm glad that they did not go with the mama open up her eyes, because that just seemed like that would have gone a totally different direction than we really needed to go at that point. I actually prefer it that they just show her and she doesn't open her eyes, because like this fake out, you're almost expecting her eyes to open as a
Right.
horror fan, but it doesn't. You're kind of like, oh, okay, I'm cool with that kind of thing.
I gotta wonder if there's some sort of Mandela effect around that too, because I feel like there are people who have said that they remember seeing the eyes open
I
when
remember
they saw it.
hearing that as well. I don't remember that, but I didn't watch part 2 for a long time when I was a kid. Like, I started with, like, I think I said the first one I saw was in theater was 7, and I kinda went
Right.
backwards to 6, and I kinda went on from there, and it was only, like, a little later on that I went back and watched, like, the original 1, 2, 3, 4 kinda thing. But yeah, I never remember that, but I do feel like that some people do remember that as well.
Yeah, because I've definitely heard people, and again, we know they filmed it, but it was never put in. It's just very
Right,
funny because I think that there are people who have psyched themselves into believing over time that
right,
she 100% opens her eyes at the end of the movie.
100%. Yeah, absolutely. So,
But I
well,
do wonder why they went with the fake out again. I really do think you're right. Like, it's just such a weird choice, because ultimately, at the end of the day, they really don't need to do that again, like,
right.
at all. So it's just so odd that they were like, "Oh, yeah, that's what we're doing."
That's just end. So,
Yeah.
all right. Well,
I don't know.
I
It
mean, I don't
still
know.
works overall, but it's just a weird choice, because I don't love that the franchise sits doing that so frequently,
Right.
especially back to back like that. Like, they're trying to be elevated horror and carrying it, like, it's just not
You're not,
necessary.
boys. You're not, boys and
You're
girls. You're
not.
not elevated horror.
You're not. And
You are
you're not Carrie, you're not Brian De Palma, you're not any of that. Like,
right.
just
Be
be
who you
Friday
are.
the
Be
13th.
who you are. Yeah, and you're a cheap slasher with a lot of fun, and scares behind you. That's all you need to be. So,
Oh,
well,
100%.
is there anything else you want to add, PJ, or should we go on to rank this bad boy?
I mean, I think at this, oh, I do wanna say the muffin coming back also is why I am convinced that it's a dream, because, like, that the shot of muffin and then the hot dogs being cooked is, and then the finding the muffin,
Right.
all of that just feels,
Disingenuous if it's not. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, because it feels like the movie's 100% pointing at it.
Yeah.
And I
Agreed.
do think that there's a part of Jenny that breaks, and that is what it is, like, that I think it's just her mind working through it
Kinda.
and
Yeah.
hoping to, see Paul, et cetera, but
I
it
I
is
will
what it
say
is.
Ginny does survive, and so if we ever do a legacy sequel of Friday the 13th, which could happen, I hope Ginny does come back. She's one of the ones I do hope come back. Like, I feel like she's not like, I feel like everybody wants Tommy to come back, and I get that. I like Tommy. I like Tommy to come back as well, but give me some Ginny as well, as far as I'm
I'll
concerned.
be very curious if they finally use her, because I know at one point, like, Steve Miner had even said he wanted her to, like, continue on. The whole point of her existence was to keep going,
Yeah.
but we only ever see her in the flashback, like, that's it.
Right. Yeah. I wonder if there's a part. I think she might have she not wanting to get involved or didn't want to be involved in the second one or the third one for some reason. I don't remember exactly what it was. I'll look into it when we watch the third one. But
Oh,
that'll be
here we
next week.
go. in part three's novelization, they state she's in a serious condition and is suffering from severe hysterical shock because of her battle with Jason. So that
Oh.
just also further kind of proves that she's probably snapped at the end of the movie.
Uh,
Does that make
it looks
sense?
like it does. I actually looked real quick at the development, and Amy Steele says she was originally going to be in 3 at one point, but she turned down the role due to her involvement in other projects, resulting in script changes. She says they really wanted me for part 3. They didn't have a script, but they were just going to show me some sort of outline. And my agents got involved, and I don't know if it was a money issue or a script issue, but I didn't do it. So,
Got it.
oh well.
All right.
I bet now she'd come
Interesting.
back for more. I bet for now she'd come back for more after this kind of years. So, but that's all right.
Yeah.
We'll find out later. So where do you want to rank this one, PJ? We did last week. We did Friday the 13th. I gave Friday the 13th a 6. You gave it a 7.5. And we go out of 11 here because we always turn it up to 11 here on PLD projects. Where do you place this one?
This is an easy 9 for me.
Oh, wow. Okay. Easy 9.
It just
Easy 9.
this is like Friday the 13th at actually, you know what? 8.5. But it's just Friday the 13th finding Friday the 13th. You know what I'm saying? And like it feels like what it should be doing. And
Okay.
I really appreciate what it is becoming as it is growing.
Okay.
And I love Ginny. I love the fact that we get Jason for the first time. Like, as I've been saying, this is my favorite Jason in a lot of ways. Like this part 2 scary, animalistic, hulking version of him. It's just kind of different and fun, and I just really like it. And I like the characters. They're more fun. Everyone feels very likable. The movie feels more fun and more likable. It's an easy watch. It's just a good movie.
I get that. I get that. I get to agree. I'm gonna sit here and give it like the good parts of this film are a 9. The bad parts of the film that annoy me are a 5. So I'm gonna cut it, split right in the middle, and give it a 7. I know
All
you're not
right.
happy with
Sure. No, I'm not.
it.
I'm not. But we all make our choices in life,
I'll make our
and
choices.
we have to live with our mistakes,
Hey, yeah, and you do it often, and that's okay.
and so do you. And
That's
it's what
fair.
I'm
That's
here
fair.
to do as your friend, where I just I pat you on the head a little bit, give you a hug. Just it's okay, buddy. It's all right. It's all gonna go away.
Well,
Here's me in your head.
we do know there are later films in this franchise that we're both going to be well on the same page for.
Okay.
So we'll get to that at that point.
Jason X fans rise
Yes,
up.
Jason Smith. It's funny. I feel like every time we do a franchise, we always have one film in the franchise that's probably not universally loved that we both love and we both champion, and we always like the whole time the podcast we're like waiting for that episode, and we know
Yeah.
in Jason it's Jason X. We're both waiting for.
Oh, it's happening. I'll tell you right now. Like
I'm
it's
very
happening.
intrigued. I can't wait. It's definitely happening. It's going to be a long one. It's going to be a fun one. But I'm very interested about the next episode. Friday 13th, part 3, 3D. I gotta say, I haven't rewatched it in a little bit. I don't remember. From what I remember, it was not my favorite, and probably my
It
least
is
favorite of
not
the
my
first 3.
favorite either. It's actually on the lower end for me.
So this might be a little bit of a slog for us to get through. We don't like hating on movies too much. I don't think we'll hate on it as much as like say,
No, no. I
well,
mean, we still get Jason for the first time in the hockey mask. There's
there's
like
some good
plenty of good
moments,
stuff.
right?
Yeah.
But it's definitely not the same caliber of 1, 2, or definitely not 4, which I both think we're going to rebound on hardcore. If I have any thoughts about that, because I do love 4
Oh, for
myself.
sure.
So, but all right, I guess that shall do it. PJ, where can the folks find you?
You guys can find me on Twitter, Instagram, Blue Sky, Threads, PJ Campbell at all those, and of course Substack. I'm doing some writing and things like that again, so that has been very fun. I'm working on some new movie stuff that I think is going to be very fun once it's up there. I'm also working on a piece about Paul McGann as the Eighth Doctor that I really want to explore why his stories have become so important in a time where there was no Doctor Who and how much it's actually worked its way into the new Who. if you will. So I'm working on some things. It's very fun. Find me on the socials and things, and then hanging out here with this show.
I can't wait to read that. You know that.
I
You
know.
can find me at Paul_Denuzio on Twitter. You can find me at PLD Projects on Threads. Although I'm not going to lie, I think until Threads gets like a desktop version, I probably won't be on it as much. I tend to do more of my
It is
posting.
coming soon.
Is
Apparently,
it?
they announced it
Oh,
today. I
good.
heard. Yeah.
Oh, good. Because I like my phone, but fat fingers and all, I tend not to post as much from the phone. But I also did get my Blue Sky invite thanks to somebody around here who I love dearly. And I am on that.
Well,
Paul Denuzzo as well. And so, yeah, absolutely. You can find me here, of course, on PLD Projects. We have a great Patreon if you want to join the Patreon, patreon.com/PLD Projects. Austin Cadell, Jeremiah Morris, Matthew Kern, Brandon Buckingham, Jeff Alterman, and all my patrons. Couldn't do it without you guys. I really do appreciate your support. On the audio side of things, I made this announcement a little bit ago, but I'll make note of it again. You might be noticing that we do have some ads now. We are a part of Gilmore Media LLC. Gilmore Media LLC with Brad Gilmore, of course, the boat from the Schmodown days.
thank you, Brad.
Thank you, Brad. Good dude. Good, very good dude. One of the coolest dudes I've ever had a chance to work with. Really nice, really supportive guy. He's putting together a conglomerate of us podcasters to try to swim forward rather than treading water, swim together rather than treading water alone. But should be a lot of fun. In fact, I just got a text that somebody else joining Gilmore Media LLC, but I don't want to announce anything. It's not my place. So that should be fun as well. Of course, on the YouTube, nothing's changed at all. We're all here. All my podcasts are here. This every 2 weeks we got Friday the 13th, part 3 coming up next time. We got a review coming up this week. My show with Lego about the sci-fi franchise of V. We have Queen on the PLD Project Crown Jewels channel, the separate YouTube channel for that, my music side of things. We are doing You and I this week, the song from A Day at the Races. And of course, Holy Snokes on this channel with Maddie Gunner. That's going to come up tomorrow, and we're going to talk the shit out of Ahsoka because of the Ahsoka premiere tonight. We can't wait. We're excited to talk about that. And I think that is all. So yeah, that'll do it, guys.
You being a little busy bee.
I know, that's just me. That's just me. Hit that like, hit that subscribe. Do me that favor. If I'm being so busy for you guys, do that for me. That's all. And share it. All right, guys. Until next time, stay mediocre and never underestimate the power of mediocrity. Bye now.
Adios.